Right, so freedom of speech, freedom of expression, it's one of those things that on the face of it gives you the impression you can say or do what you like, and the law protects your right to do so. But of course, things like libel and slander wouldn't exist if that were the case. So espousing your right to free speech is all well and good, but most of us appreciate that that has to come with a certain sense of responsibility and appreciation that you can't necessarily say and do whatever you like. And whilst I certainly like to poke fun at the expense of people I certainly think deserve it, I'm always conscious of ensuring what I'm doing is factually correct, and that any humorous elements I include in my videos are done within that sense of being responsible. It's why the vast majority of my time in making content is devoted to writing. The actual filming and editing is all much less time consuming. I admire those who can wing a video, but I'd always have a nagging doubt at the back of my mind that maybe I might get something wrong, and I pride myself on avoiding that. Now, I'm certainly not going to imply that mainstream media, and when I say that, I'm thinking of the TV stuff at the minute, the likes of Good Morning Britain, or the Jeremy Vine Show, or This Morning, or Question Time, are not informed and pre-prepared, organised, likely far more so than me most of the time. They have teams of people, after all, to do all this behind-the-scenes stuff, yet still, these shows have guests, they have panels, which make me question their devotion to responsible freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Now, when it comes to MPs, they are public representatives, and it's right that they should be given the hardest time possible, held to account for their actions and the things they say. And of course, some shows do this much better than others. We all remember the Johnson government boycotting GMB because they gave ministers a hard time and they didn't like it, little snowflakes. Alternatively, you get the likes of Laura Koonsberg's Sunday waste of time, where she and Andrew Marr before her in the same time slot on the BBC, giving ministers, by and large, a very easy ride. It's so important that all of the questions put to guests and panels, though, are in the public interest, that a proper answer is demanded, chased up, the powers that be held to account. But equally, it is important that guests remain credible in relation to current affairs, the issues affecting ordinary people who will be watching when it comes to government policy and government failings. When people are suffering, when life is tough, as it is right now, you expect to have some answers from the government you elect and from those commentating on it when featured on mainstream programmes, because then they're given automatically some level of credibility, aren't they? Yet increasingly, that really hasn't been the case. And the standout example most recently, and what prompted me to do this video on media responsibility, was Ann Widdecombe this week being questioned on the matter of the cost of living crisis, and in particularly in relation to the inflation of food. Now, Widdecombe, of course, is a former Tory MP, former minister of the John Major government, and when talking about impoverishment, the fact she was formerly the Minister for Employment, a former Undersecretary at the Department for Social Security, as it was at the time, before it got rolled in with pensions and became the DWP. She's aware of the hardship people go through. It was her job at that time. And as a former MP, with constituents, obviously, you'd think she would speak from a position of knowledge and responsibility. And indeed, if she still was a minister, you'd expect her to be held far more accountable for what she says and does, instead of being presented as this wizened old political sage. But she isn't. She became disillusioned with how Brexit got screwed up by the Tories after it got voted through in the 2016 referendum. And after that, she ought to have become a bit of a red flag. That should have been fairly obvious at that point, joining the Brexit party of Nigel Farage, as she did, especially to campaign for the hardest of hard Brexits at that point, getting expelled by the Tory party in so doing. You have to bear in mind here that as much as Farage was basically platformed seemingly week in, week out on the likes of Question Time, to the point it became a running joke that he had a reserved seat. And I think this is actually the time, roundabouts, where mainstream media, by and large, began to start to fail us with its guest selections, pushing a narrative and no longer balanced, free and fearless. Widdecombe, of course, became an MEP then, and for the Brexit party as it was, and now, still determined to see through a hard Brexit, has just become ever more hard right, still with the Brexit party to all intents and purposes, though now, of course, it goes by the name of Reform UK and is actually a private company pretending to be a democratic party owned and subsidised by Talk TV's Richard Tice. So she's got this background of being presented as ordinarily right-wing as a Tory before drifting to become ever more batshit right-wing over Brexit. And like I say, she's still presented as this reasonable, informed, balanced voice that is suitable for these panel shows on politics. Frankly, you'd get more recent discussion out of David Icke. She was never a mainstream conservative voice. She always sat at the extreme end of the Tory party. She's always been, for example, anti-abortion, pro-death penalty, a climate change denialist, is opposed to the notion of same-sex marriage, and is on record as saying she doesn't think homosexuality rights are an equality issue. As prisons minister, this is what she should be known for above all else. She oversaw pregnant women prisoners being shackled when in hospital, receiving treatment lest they try to escape. So hers is a track record not without controversy, and yet despite all of that, is still seen by some media programming today as being someone responsible to contribute to current affairs discussion. She proved beyond doubt this week she does not belong on our screens in this context. She's not some cuddly old granny who once did Strictly. She's a venomous, empathy-deficient individual commenting on hardship, which she has ministerial experience of, and yet when questioned about food inflation, as she was on Politics Live with Joe Coburn this week, guarantee the BBC would have her on of anybody, she was asked about the fact that some people cannot afford to pay for even basic foodstuffs anymore. Food inflation at 19% now is the highest it has been for 45 years. It's no longer a question of making ends meet for people. Food prices are so high as to have become unaffordable. And she was asked about the fact that people cannot even now afford to make something like a cheese sandwich, something as basic as a bit of bread, a bit of spread, and cheese. And her response was, well, then you don't do the cheese sandwich. This is one of the simplest, most basic things you can make. And when told there are people in this country who cannot afford even to make that, her response is to dismiss it. Eat something else then. Well, how long do you kick that can down the road? Because there's not much further to go now, is there? It's a bit of a Reform UK message on poverty, though, isn't it? Tice's partner, we should also remember, the odious Isabel Oakeshott, will be forever remembered as telling people a few years ago now they can just eat porridge if they can't afford anything else. Things are far worse now, of course. People are even resorting to stealing baby formula these days, as another panellist told her, and Widdecombe just poured scorn on that by saying, well, none of that's new. Well, that's a failure to address a problem that's years long in the making, then, isn't it? A problem that has just worsened. To Widdecombe, it's not a problem, clearly, because it's been an issue for some time. It's been an issue since Tories came back into power. Your former party came back in, Anne, and implemented austerity, worsened again as a result of the maladministration of Brexit, leading to food shortages due to all the new red tape, an issue that has been aggravated also by the pandemic due to the government opening the country up again too fast before suppliers could meet demand and supply stuff again. But oh no, it's an old problem. Why are you bringing it up? Let them eat cake is the narrative. The cake is expensive too now, isn't it? Widdecombe blames the lack of inflation previously for high food prices now that we can't cope with, but her answer is still that we fend for ourselves. And when inflation has been driven directly by both Tory government incompetence completely, the pandemic and Brexit both handled appallingly badly, with incomes suppressed during all of that time too. At this time, here and now, as a result of Liz Truss's disaster budget, for example, just making life worse, people's mortgage payments have been doubling or even trebling, removing even more income from families, being passed on to tenants in the case of buy-to-let landlords. This is a problem that is getting persistently worse as more and more factors come in to contribute to the problem, which is just going to keep growing. And the BBC saw fit to bring in somebody they knew would trivialise it, because she's been around for decades. They know what Ann Widdecombe is like. 19% inflation is just the headline figure for food, though. Inflation on cucumbers alone is 52%. Baked beans, 40%. Cheese is now more than £9 per kilo, or £2.2 for those in old money. No wonder it now gets locked up in security cases, is it? No wonder what was once a simple staple is now so ridiculously expensive. Corned beef, a staple sandwich filler when I was a kid because it's cheap, has literally doubled in price now. Greedflation, it's been called. The supermarkets over-profiting is the accusation. But to the stagnant fossil that is Ann Widdecombe, her ministerial pension ensuring she's doing just fine, of course, plus all these dratted appearance fees she's been racking up. In her mind, it's the farmer's fault for asking more money from the supermarkets. Well, God forbid the people who produce the food actually get a decent return for their labour, eh? No, to free marketeers on steroids, Thatcherites like Anne, greed is good. And the BBC, amongst others, let her peddle this dross, wind us up, leave us in despair. It's no wonder so many of us switch the BBC off, really, is it? Balance, they call it, but when people need answers, need government figures, actual people in government who actually are capable of doing something to be put on the spot over such things, Instead, we get idiots like Ann Widdecombe wheeled out to frankly treat us all with contempt with her out-of-touch views that help nobody, that do not contribute to the discussion one iota. It is irresponsible. It doesn't add balance to a debate when the only balance here is them against us, and when we're the ones in need of answers from them, balance be damned. People going hungry need to be kept hungry for the sake of balance. We need to get someone on with that opposing view, despite being, I would sincerely hope, in the vast minority. Oh, do sod off. It's not just the TV media guilty of it either. The print media let a Bank of England bigwig called Hugh Bill spout off that people needed to get used to being poorer the other day. Well, sorry, Hugh, but no, we don't. An economy that doesn't work in our interest isn't one that we have any business supporting, and why should we? He has since apologised, but only because poverty presumably had to be explained to somebody on his income using crayons and speaking slowly. The Leanderthal, 30p Lee Anderson, an MP, get him on, roast him over his comments. His 30p meals he thinks you can concoct, which is just epic gaslighting at an insultingly high degree. Don't disagree with him, though. He'll want to take you outside and have a punch-up. Handbags at dawn, is it, Lee? I started this talking about responsibility of freedom of speech. And yeah, as I've outlined here, the media are failing in that. I hope I have got that point across. We aren't getting informed, aren't hearing what we need to hear, watching the few panelists on a show arguing amongst themselves because one of them is unhinged doesn't tell us anything, doesn't shine a light at the end of the tunnel for us. There are far too many out-of-touch idiots being put on our screens, like Ann Widdecombe. When was the last time somebody actually on the receiving end was able to debate this with people? Food inflation affects the poorest people disproportionately more because they spend a greater percentage of their income on it. That, for many families, is being reduced even further. Something has to give. Fools like the hard-right media guests are blind to it or don't care. And indeed, the programmes hosting them are the same because they aren't touched by the hurt right now. There is an economic reckoning coming with all the factors that are coming into play here. And that'll affect more than just food because it'll be everything. Because it is literally impossible that this unaffordability for so many people continues how it is. And Tory promises of halving inflation by the end of the year show no signs of happening. Now, many of you who watch my regular content will know how much I espouse independent media, telling it like it is, without the massive resources of the mainstream. But foreign state media is also very good at exposing it as well here. Quite often, it does better coverage of the news that's happening in this country than we actually get from our own stations. And the BBC found that out not all that long ago at the hands of Al Jazeera in the Labour files. The BBC didn't come out of those films any better than the Labour Party did, oddly enough. So if you want a bit more news on mainstream media failings, watch this video to see what came of that. Oh, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe whilst you're at it, of course. Cheers, folks.